Well, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. I see a lot of your questions. I'll try and squeeze in all of them as fast as I can for the professor. Prof, there's a general concern from parents that they feel ambushed by these things that the students want. Why don't you have something like a projected need? For example, if there's a week that's coming and they know that their students need something about transport, then they will prepare for it. Rather than walking home like some of the parents I'm working with right now, then they find that their daughter wants something for tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much, Trevor.
Yeah.
What you've said is an extremely important point. And I think, let me summarize those concerns into one thing. A key pillar in the competency-based curriculum is what we call parental engagement and empowerment. It is anticipated that parents will not be ambushed, that teachers and parents will work collaboratively, they will engage, so that, as you do say very, very correctly, parents, for example, might know that these might be some of the things that will require of your children to be able to do, and the options that are there, so that if they are not making the necklaces out of beans because beans are not available, what could the necklaces be made of? Is it something that the parents might get from within? And we talk about parental empowerment. Parents, just like now, but possibly more intense in CBC, have the right to make certain decisions in issues that they think might affect their children adversely. If, for example, you realize that maybe these requirements that teachers have asked of the children to have, the teachers have asked you to take a picture of your children with the family, and you don't have a camera, you don't have a phone that can do that, what options is the teacher availing for you to do? It might be draw your parents and your siblings. What options might be there? Are there options like borrowing a phone from a neighbor or something? So I think all these things that parents are reporting as being demanded by teachers are not in the curriculum designs. If you look at any curriculum design, we have what we call suggested learning activities. They are suggested learning experiences. They are suggested, and they give all sorts of options as long as the expected learning outcomes are attained. Which brings me to the question of stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
Trevor, by our mandate as KICD, we develop curricular designs through three big mechanisms. One is research, two is stakeholder engagement, and three is international benchmarking. And in terms of parental engagement, I can assure you, right from the needs assessment for curriculum reforms, throughout the life of the task force, parents spoke to us. And the nature of how we run our organizations, for example, is that we have an academic committee, we have a course panel. All these are representative of people from various cadres who always will represent the views of parents, the views of the religious society, the views of the industry, and so on. So all these things usually come to the table, and it is not closed. At every stage of our curriculum development, all these organizations will come back together to be able to give their views on what they think should be improved. And somebody mentioned teacher preparation.
Yeah.
Yes. You may be aware by now that the country has inducted over 150,000 teachers. It's being done gradually. You know, like now we are targeting teachers who are teaching upper primary, and this will go all the way to primary colleges and even secondary schools.
Yeah.
So at every stage, teachers are taken through the process of what do we expect you to be able to ask of parents as resources, what kind of interactive activities are we expecting of you to do, so that we are not burdening the parents as long as we achieve our outcomes.
Yeah.
And just to assure Wesaya, he says that he's educated, some parents are not aware. KICD and the Ministry of Education and all other stakeholders in education are starting a process of actively engaging parents through their national organization and going down towards the counties, so that then parents are sensitized through advocacy. They are empowered. That is now the empowerment bit on what to expect of their children.
Shouldn't that have happened before the curriculum was
put in place? A bit of it has already taken place, actually. I remember when we started the task force, one of our assignments the first 2 weeks was actually engaging stakeholders in the counties, in sub-counties, telling parents what to expect and also getting their views on what to do. If you allow me, I'll move to two quick issues that were raised. One, when is the report being shared? I'm happy to report that the report is are available at the government printers. Anybody can walk in there and get a copy. because it's a government document, we are not allowed to do mass production, for example, and sell it through bookshops, but it's available there. One day Enjoy is asked about back to A levels. It's not quite back to A levels. If you think about it, the key issue in CBC is nurturing every learner's potential. So junior secondary was conceived to be able to give the learners a broad spectrum of learning areas, learning experiences, out of which we might be able to discover their potential. And so from senior secondary, which might be considered equivalent of A level, learners will be able to choose one of the pathways or tracks in which what they have learned at junior secondary and their performance has demonstrated that they have potential, that they have they have talent. This is not quite what we had at A levels, where the subject combinations were very tight and the range of things that learners could do were a bit limited. Yes.
Wesaya, do you get a feeling that maybe some of the teachers themselves have not quite understood the system and therefore are overburdening the parents unnecessarily?
Yes, there is a sense that the teacher is frustrated in a way because they do not have good capacity, and when they lack that capacity, they make it out on the learner in the way they deliver the lesson. So that frustration then manifests itself on how they handle the learners. But also, in many schools, the management of the schools has had all the teachers, those who are nearly retiring, they call them Bambatano. Those waiting for the 5 years to go away. Those are the teachers who are teaching lower primary, and those are the teachers that the Teacher Service Commission has been preparing for CBC. So why are we making investment in these teachers, then we let them go when we know for sure that we are not going to use them for long enough to realize the investment made?
Okay. Reverend, still have more concerns?
Yes, thank you, Trevor. My concern is what are we doing to help those parents who are not aware of the CBC and yet they are supposed to help the learners? Secondly, I have a question to Prof. In the 844 that is facing out, if a pupil is of a low performance, the expectation is that the child or the pupil would join a day school or a sub-county secondary school. A middle performer will join county or extra county. High performer will join national school. How will the now adopted curriculum be classified to guide parents that this set of pupils will join the respective schools of their choice depending on the diverse strengths of such pupils? And then finally, again, I go back to the issue of expense. Prof agreed at some point that there will be need to increase or to add more classrooms. Isn't that, again, an added cost to the parents for the new construction of classrooms to give room to the addition of classrooms? And finally, is the Prof saying that teachers were not adequately trained to handle CBC when, let's say, he suggests that this is just a guideline, but again, what we get is totally very expensive. Thank you, Trevor.
Prof, in fact, that question on the extra county schools and national schools is a very important one.
Yes, very important. And if you ask me to start with that, it's about placement of learners. And as I've already indicated, in the CBC, we expect that all learners from primary will transit to secondary. Now, after junior secondary, the transition is expected to be largely based on the learner's potential. We have three large pathways. We have the STEM, science, technology, and mathematics. We have social sciences. We have arts and sports. So depending on what the learners shall have demonstrated, shall have discovered as their potential, their talent, it is expected that where they go to will largely depend on what they want to do, and also on the proximity to maybe where they are. So we were not going to be categorizing people as low achievers going to sub-county schools. It's an interesting question, because if you think about it, Trevor, 75% of our secondary schools in this country are actually those county and sub-county schools. Our learners go there. So really just about 25% of our learners go to the extra county and the other schools. And they do well. The records show that. So basically what we are saying is it is high time we thought about choice of schools in terms of proximity, the learners they'll be saving costs, and also in terms of what they want to do and what the schools offer. And again, to assure Reverend Diane, in terms of the infrastructural needs, additional classrooms and so on, I did say earlier on that the Taskforce report indicates this is not necessarily going to be uniform across the country. There are some sub-counties now, if you look at the learners who are transiting from primary to that place, even with the double intake, there will be not too much demand on infrastructure. Actually, if the schools just expanded maybe 10% of their infrastructure, they should be able to take care of those learners. And it's important to indicate that I don't think the government has closed out the possibility of using some, primary schools that will have those spaces, add on laboratories, add on libraries, add on the relevant resources and teachers, and they can host junior secondary. Very quickly, allow me to think about Wanawesai's question about teachers being frustrated. I think in every organization, every system, you may find exceptions, but I can tell you now, KICD has just come back from the field. We went to all counties in this country, actually all sub-counties, monitoring the implementation of CBC. And the preliminary reports that we have so far show that the uptake of CBC is so successful. Even these demands that we are talking about really are issues that we should be treating as isolated. And parents are free to engage the schools that may be putting unreasonable demands on them so that the teachers start to get aware. But I link that with what Diane has said about the teachers being adequately trained. It is important to indicate, Trevor, that all trained teachers everywhere in the world, but let me zero down to Kenya, because as you may not know, I initially trained as a diploma teacher myself before I did a bachelor's and then later on progressed. All teachers are trained on learner-centered pedagogies, interactive methodologies, the use of resources, including improvisation. So basically, what happened is that over time, because of the concentration and emphasis on exams, teachers tended to concentrate more on drilling learners to pass exams. And that interactive improvisation bit got a bit relaxed. So basically what we are reminding our teachers, you can summarize it into two statements. We are reminding teachers that, look, in CBC, you are not a sage on stage. That teacher who stands there and talks and the class is quiet. In CBC, you are a guide by the side. I'll give you the example of the driving school. When you go to driving school, they tell you, the learner, get onto the steering wheel. I'll sit on your side and support you. I normally say when I go to see my student teachers in school that if I hear you talk and there's no learner involvement for 10 minutes in a class, I should ask you to pay fees, because you're not the one who has gone there to learn. The learner who has paid fees should be the one doing more of the talking, especially if you teach a language there I am. So just to assure teachers that these ones will end as we induct colleagues, as we induct teachers going along, this will end. And I don't think it's very true that only old teachers are teaching grade 1, 2, 3. Indeed, when we do curricula at KICD, we involve the teachers who are on the ground, and they must demonstrate, confirmed by the head teachers, that they teach their classes that we involve them to do curricula about. There are very many young, vibrant teachers teaching these lower grades who are really transforming this country in terms of the uptake. And here, I'm a researcher. I talk about data that I have from the ground on the uptake of CBC, which we shall be very free to share very soon when we conclude the analysis.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Let me bring in the questions that were sent on video. Let's play 3 of them.
How will it solve the problem of unemployment, for example, in Kenya in the next 20 years coming? Thank you.
The 844 system was a very good system, and it only lacked resources to push it. That is why it did not help a lot. To them, do they see this new curriculum being better than the 844 system? And will it get resources enough for it to succeed?
What is the government doing to ensure that the student-teacher ratio is actually unified? Secondly, what is are they prepared for the next grade, for grade 6 actually, in terms of resources and readiness? Thank you.
All right, and Professor Humphrey Obora is asking that please ask the good professor if he knows the difference between talent and competence. Well, he needs to know that competence is a subset of talent, or rather a sign or symptom of talent. So him saying that talent will be nurtured out of their competence is a big contradiction and belies a problem in the CBC that many experts have spoken of. Simply put, can you teach talent and by extension competence?
Let me start with Humphrey Obora's question. An interesting academic engagement in which we can involve ourselves at a different stage, an area that I must admit I will really like discussing. But simply put to our viewers outside academic jargon, a competence is an actionable attribute, that which we can see a learner and of course anybody else to demonstrate that they have the ability to do. So, talking, Trevor, you may have a lot of knowledge about, anchoring news and so on, and you can talk about all the theories. But the issue is, when we put you on stage like you are now, are you able to do that art of being able to anchor news? That is a competence, a demonstrable attribute. A talent, of course, is that, normally people say that God-given ability to be able to do something, but it's got to be nurtured. Yes, so we are talking about nurturing of learners' potential, but we are talking about developing learners' competencies. Humphrey, I'm sure you know me, we can engage on this later on in big detail, and this is an area that is interesting. Now, grade 5 and 6 preparedness, yes, we are prepared. As I talk to you now, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development has developed the designs for grade 5, has already evaluated learner support materials, textbooks. The publishers who have won have been informed. Contracts are being developed and they'll be issued, I believe, in the next 1 week. And so before these learners get to grade 5 in July, the books will be out. Same to grade 6. We have already developed the designs. We have already engaged the publishers to submit the learner support materials on this. And let me add that even for learners with special needs, we have already adapted all the designs meant for regular learners, and we are in the process of adapting learner support materials so that they move in tandem with the others. Learner-student ratio, yes, this is something that I believe is in the shoulders of the government. As you have seen, every year the government tries to employ more teachers as interns or as full-time teachers. And this is being done with a view to bridging the learner-teacher ratio, which is a concern. But also, some of these concerns which are being raised, if you think about what Reverend Diane was raising about even the parental, the parents being very busy and so on, they're not different from CBC. The same situations arise even in 844.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the last one, the issue of 844 was a good curriculum. It lacked resources. Yes, we don't want to say that we are reforming 844 because it's bad, because then we shall be vilifying. We shall be saying all these learners who are still continuing the system are bad people.
Yeah.
But we are saying that the 21st century has presented new realizations that call for a review of our curricula. For example, the 844 may not have offered all these options that we are now offering now. It may not have been very strong on values. We possibly concentrated on knowledge, skills, and attitudes at the expense of values, community service learning, and parental engagement. But I think it is important as an educator to be able to point out that let us not say 844 was bad, because otherwise the country will not be going on with it. The issue is that as His Excellency the President did say when he was launching the Taskforce report, new realities globally have presented new demands. If you think about digital literacy, for example, it is something that today is extremely critical for the learners. If you think about issues such as creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, if you think about self-efficacy, these are critical issues for the 21st century learner, and these are the issues that are being emphasized in CBC.
Okay.
Yes.
Jenny is asking, that says, ask the prof, where would you place a child who is good in art and also interested in STEM? But before we do that, I want to get closing remarks from Wesaya and Reverend. Wesaya, I'll start with you because we've run out of time, so that Professor can then answer all of them in summary. Wesaya, closing remarks?
For me, it would be more engagement with the stakeholders and parents to explain to them the role they need to play, but invest in teachers for us to get this right from the word book.
All right. Reverend, closing remarks from you?
Thank you, Trevor. At this point, let me appreciate teachers who have really adjusted to the new style of teaching, and they're really helpful. Some are very committed. However, allow me to point out that in as much as this info is out there and even easily accessible, I think there is need to, again, invest in training of parents, especially when we're talking about the marginalized group of parents, let's say in the rural setup or even in the urban poor. I think there is need to do more emphasis on sensitizing the parents. I would like to ask one final question, because one time I think maybe I can take my daughter to a boarding school, but what I ask is that how do we standardize learning experiences for those in boarding who have no parents to go to for assistance, and those who are coming home for assistance from parents? Thank you so very much, Trevor, and the team for the opportunity.
All right, thank you very much. Let's bring up the videos that are remaining. I think we can squeeze in like 4 of them at the same time so that Professor summarizes.
CBC is about competencies. Now my question is, what are some of the competencies that the creators envisioned that at the end of it, learners should have achieved, so that we can monitor whether it is being effective or not?
I think there must be some loopholes somewhere for this implementation of CBC to be successful. Number 2, I really want to hear from our guests what is being done to the teachers who are in the universities and colleges who are now being trained 844 instead of being trained the teaching of the CBC in our schools.
We've been talking about emphasis on other aspects of curricular development, such as sports, but we realize in most of our schools they don't have these facilities. How then is the other aspect of CBC going to be inculcated?
CBC requires some resources that may not be available to all parents. For example, internet. How do we then expect learners to undertake a common exam?
Is there any strategy that have been set in place to ensure that there are many teachers that are being employed to curb this CBC program?
With Kenya's unemployment rate standing at 2.64%, innovation is the surest way to get us out of this situation, and the competency based curriculum just but provides that answer. The government needs to invest more in this and also invest in the TVET institution that will be able to create a workforce not ready to go out there and look for employment, but ready to create innovations and solutions that will revolutionize and change the world for the better.
All right, Prof.
Thank you.
Can summarize all this in a few minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Trevor.
Yeah.
I agree with my colleagues, fellow panelists, Wesaya and Reverend Yan, that stakeholder engagement, teacher and parent empowerment, these are things that we have tried, we have started, they will continue as we get on to higher levels of curriculum involvement, and let them join us in doing this. This is something that, as somebody mentions, is not just a purview of the government. Those colleagues who are out there, the teachers who have been trained, the parents who have already understood what should be done, feel free to support us in letting others know basically what CBC is about and removing the myths, for example, about the excessive expenses. The competencies that we are talking about, this is critical, thanks to the questioner. We are talking about communication and collaboration, very, very critical. We are talking about critical thinking. We are talking about citizenship. We are talking about creativity. So that gives us the 4 C's. Then we get to digital literacy, which is extremely important. Then we are talking about self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a powerful, just getting our learners to be assured, to be confident that they can indeed live in this competitive world. And let me also mention a very, very critical competency, learning to learn, appreciation that all opportunities that we get, all interactions we go through are moments for us to be able to learn something else among our learners. And the last one that I could pick, yes, which is critical for me, is true. There are many teachers out there, even today, who are in colleges, who are in universities. This Taskforce report gives very clear proposals on how the teachers who are out there could be offered courses, continuous professional development courses that will, one, update them on CBC, but also, for example, those who are P1s, you know, the primary school certificate holders who are teachers, can be gradually upgraded to the diploma level. And the Teacher Service Commission has a lot of programs for upgrading teachers for this and always continually engaging them so that it's called continuous teacher professional development. So this should not be a worry to our colleagues out there.
Okay.
Yes, and I think in terms of internet connectivity, I'm sure you are aware, Trevor, of the efforts the government is making to ensure that this is a continuous effort. It's something that will, and even the international, development partners. This is something that we may not achieve overnight, but the government is doing it gradually, and I think in due course, most of our contexts will be connected to enable learners enhance their digital literacy.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Professor Charles Ongondo, thank you so much for making time. Director KICD and CEO KICD as well, member of CBC Taskforce and a parent, like you mentioned. Thank you very much for making time. It's important to mention you're the only one who's bold enough from the Taskforce to come and answer questions from the parents. We appreciate your time. Jonathan Wesai, education expert and a parent as well, and Reverend Diane Mugambi, a parent as well. Thank you so much for all the views you've sent in. I'm sure we'll have Professor again at some point because I'm sure that you've run out of time. There are many questions that we couldn't squeeze in, but we'll have Professor again come and explain the CBC and ensure that you're engaged enough to ensure that this becomes a future. All right, bye for now. My name is Trevor Mbija. Always a pleasure having you with us here on the Monday Report. See you again next week. Good night.
Thank you very much, Trevor.